Wow, it's really good to see you again. I hated the pandemic, being able to have talks in front of a webcam and not seeing anyone. So good to see you here, but I have no clue what I'm doing here. I mean, look at the last speaker. He had 21 slides, and they've all been talking about AI. I'm not going to talk about AI. I don't know. I sent 2 proposals for a talk, and I got a message back, you're accepted. And I said, which one? Both. So I had the final talk before lunch. I'm standing between you and food, and I have 125 slides, poorly done by an amateur. But are you ready? Yes. Let's go then. I'm going to talk about something strange. I'm going to talk about regulation. I'm Olle. I am a software addict. Thank you. We're all VASP, right? We're software addicts. We like software. I've been in the software industry for as long as I remember. Some people accuse me of founding the Swedish game industry because instead of going to lessons, I called in sick and wrote computer game software. That was the first commercial software, game software released for IBM PC on DOS, with music on DOS. Right. We wrote it in the 70s. After that, I've been involved in commercial software, software distribution, PC-TCP, TCP/IP for PC-DOS and compatibles, right? Green binders, my wife said. It was much easier. I've been in open source. I'm one of the core developers in Asterisk, or I was for 10 years. I've been doing all kinds of software stuff. I just love software. So I've sold commercial, I've developed commercial. I've been a consultant now for many years in commercial software projects. What about security? That stuff, when I've opened issues on security, it ends up so far down the backlogs, it composts and disappears. I had one product manager who deleted issues in a year. Can you believe it? Didn't close them. Deleted to get rid of them. Security goes so far way back. Blinking lamps over here. More blinking lamps, more cool features. Oh, a new drag and drop in the graphical user interface. Yeah, let's put all developers on that. Security. Don't understand. Don't want to. All of this is going to change because the society gave up. There's so much shitty software, so much shitty systems out there that they said, we have to fix this balance because users will never have the knowledge they need to be good customers and require the security mechanism they need to protect themselves, their businesses, and other places. So we're facing a software regulation revolution and never before. And I'm so frustrated because no one seems to get it. My LinkedIn is overflowing with lawyers saying, oh, we have a webinar on these too. Lawyers. And they will soon start understanding CRA and say, oh, we have the webinars with everything you need about CRA. And that's fine. I'm not a lawyer. They will talk about compliance and stuff. I like to see how the regulation affects the software development, how it affects product management, how it affects our way of working. That's, for me, the interesting part. You'll soon get invitations to all those legal sessions. Have fun. I'm not going to be there. So, the problem. The cost for cybersecurity incidents in the society is way too high. Up in cold Sweden, a grocery chain had to close for a week because of ransomware, all over Sweden. Imagine the amount of Swedish milk and meatballs that got destroyed, right? Cost is way too high. And we see it all over the place. And we know about more happening than what's actually out in the public. The resilience is too low. When something happens, it doesn't come back. So when things happen, when we actually send out alarms like Log4j, customers are worried, right? Log4j, a Java library, they said on the news in Sweden. On the news? A CVE on the news? Cool. That weekend, I got my mailbox filled up with customers asking, are we affected? Some of them requiring me, as an open source developer of that software, to fill in forms and legally binding documents. I'm like, go away. We're developing in good old C. Don't talk to me about memory safe languages and all that stuff. C is what we need for real-time communication, for IP telephony and video. So they kept asking, where in my network do I have the problem? Because, of course, if I manage IT in an organization, I want to know, and I want to set priorities. I want to assign the resources where I really need them. So they called vendors, they requested answers, they sent forms yesterday. And this was the weekend. I guess many of you worked that weekend. And everyone got busy. Right? I actually asked Brian Behlendorf, who was part of founding the Open Source Security Foundation, OpenSSF, about the starting point. And he said, well, we did some calculations about the cost for trying to find out whether or not we were affected by Log4j all over the US. And he said, I think that if we take that massive amount of millions and millions and millions of dollars, take a small part of that, it will still be a massive fund for fixing software. And that's what he did with OpenSSF. So Log4j was one type of problem. OpenSSL, we heard about Heartbleed. The bugs even get logotypes. I like that. And SolarWinds was another kind of attack. It was a supply chain attack, but really bad. Someone injected bad software into the development platform. They signed it properly, so signatures was fine, distributed to the customers, and the customers were the attack targets. When we build software today, we build based on components we bring from the outside, most of them open source. So they have security issues. Tools we use to build, compilers, test environments, CI/CD, tool chains, they have problems. We need routines to manage this, be able to assess, put in resources where we need. Because the governments, they say enough is enough. And it's not just the CRA and EU, it's all over. You'll see similar regulation. They do it a little bit differently. In the US, they're starting now with federal procurement. In the EU, I didn't know, I don't know if you did, there's a world championship in regulations. The EU claims that we're leaders in software regulation. Right. I didn't know. But obviously there is. So the EU, with the CRA, they regulate the whole software industry that isn't already under other regulations like military and medical and some other areas. So the core of the Cyber Resilience Act is to protect the citizens, protect society. They think that this will lower the cost of cyber incidents. It will, of course, raise costs somewhere else, right? either for purchasing software or for creating software. But they want to protect the EU market because enough is enough. So let's look into the Cyber Resilience Act. The first part, the vendors are responsible. They're pushing that. You can't say, oh, you forgot to fix the firewall. Oh, did you attach that lamp to a network with my device? That's not my problem. That lamp is bad. You can't act like that as a vendor. You have to provide services and products that are resilient, that are secure. You have to take responsibility. Products need to be secure by design and secure by default. And it's like, what? That was actually in the first text from the Commission. I didn't expect legal text to be filled with buzzwords. Buzzwords like that are temporary. I'm old enough. I've seen them come and go. Client-server computing, right? Anyone remember? Secure by design and secure by default. We're getting more and more definitions. But the funny part is that the definition of secure by design is produced by CISA in the US in cooperation with some EU countries. As a vendor, you need to provide free security updates for the designated lifetime of the product. And that lifetime, you can't say that, well, when you buy my Olle Gadget 2000, that's have an estimated lifetime of 2 weeks. No. The market authorities will balance this and say that, well, on this market, the estimated lifetime for this device is this. There is kind of advice to set this to 5 years, but if the market expects more, if your type of device is something that is on the wall for 10 years, then 5 years probably won't be enough. But free security updates, you have to provide that. Okay? And if there are any known exploits in your product line, anywhere, you need to inform all the users. Okay. Basically what they're doing, they're very clever. They're taking the CE mark that we know from all the hardware products and all the radio products and expanding that to include cybersecurity in the software. So everything you get from the App Store, all the systems from your laptop, they need CE marking. And exactly as the CE marking on devices, you know that if you buy something from Husqvarna, a proper Swedish company, they've done the right thing. But if you buy something while visiting an electronic store in Asia that has CE mark, but by accident is mirrored, is EC, a lot of CE is actually self-certification, and it will still be here. So the CE mark is for customers to be able to make an informed choice. If you're bringing software in, like I did, I brought software in from the US mainly, and from a weird country across the English Channel called England, then you are liable as well. You're part of this. Or if you have distributors. So you're not getting away. Your manufacturer needs to do the right thing, and you need to assure that they are doing the right thing, or else you will get the full responsibility. That's an interesting thing for Gadget Store. Coming back to SolarWinds, you need to make sure that the software supply chain you're working with is secure. That's part of secure by design. You need to make sure that your software isn't really compiled on Ben's laptop, and you have no idea what Ben's laptop is doing over the weekends, right? You need a tool chain. You need a documentation. And we'll see what happens with the guidelines. Products are divided into several classes, and some classes are really strict. You may need attestations from the build system on how you build, when you build, and with which tools and libraries and components you built the software with. We have a gentleman in the audience here who can explain all about in-toto attestations for you. That's a good thing to listen to over lunch. I will certainly do that. The Cyber Resilience Act, as many of the other regulations, is risk-based. You have to do a risk analysis. You need to keep working with that as you enhance your product. And your mitigations need to be balanced to that risk analysis. And this is part of the documentation you need. If something happens, and shit always happens, the authorities will ask you for your risk analysis, your mitigations, and other things, right? So you don't have to build a fortress out of a doll, an electronic doll that's connected to the internet. But you need to do what's appropriate for the doll market. Open source have been the sore point of the CRA, because in the first generation of the CRA, it was very clear that the people in the commission who worked with this, they got all of the businesses, all the IT industry knocking on the doors because they have lobbyists. But the open source guys, we were back home hacking our code, didn't understand what was going on, we didn't bother. So the text was really, really strange and could hurt the open source industry as a whole. Unfortunately, they changed it, so I don't have to move abroad. I can actually stay. So it's much, much better now. But we do still have a dialogue. We have heroes like Fukami. Are you here? I don't see him. He's hiding. We have heroes that actually interact with the politicians, that interact with the commission, from OpenSSF, Linux Foundation, Eclipse, and many other foundations. Yes?
Does this affect me as a software engineer or a company who's building software, or is this more about like a new political type role in government? I don't understand what changes here.
You want to understand if this affects you as a software engineer or as a company. I'm trying to. Yeah. Yes, it does. If you're distributing your software to Europe, you're making it available to Europe, regardless of where in the world you are, you will be affected in one way or another. Now, one exclusion that's very clear is that if you have a GitHub repo and you're doing something and produce source code that people can take for whatever they want, then you're not placing it on the market. You are outside of this. But if there are gray zones we're trying to find out. I can't really answer today. Like, you are a couple of companies that have worked with this open source project that have been in existence for 20 years, and you make your living and you found your work in the open source by selling consultancy services. That's a gray zone. Are you a commercial vendor or are you really an open source project?
I guess my question is, do I need to publish an SBOM? Do I need to hire an open source steward? What's my job as a major software manufacturer when it comes to it? I'm already dedicated to open source updating. I run STA tools. I already have a mission to keep my open source libraries up to date.
Jim, that's a very good question. I have answers for you in my coming 135 slides. And the training tomorrow, which will be about 500 slides. But hang on, and we'll see if I can answer you, right? Maintaining an SBOM is mandatory. Funny enough, the legislation doesn't say anything about providing it to customers. It says that if you're providing it to customers, blah, blah, blah. But if things happen, and especially if you're in that product category where you need a certification, then authorities or the certification body will look into your SBOMs. In a conversation with the CISA, they said that any vulnerability found in your SBOM will be seen as non-compliance, which is just bullshit and stupidness. But we are in dialogue. So what time have we got? Well, December 11th, 2 days before Lucia in Sweden, and the day after the Nobel Prize dinner, that's when the act will become a law all over Europe. After that, we have 2 different steps, which I'll explain. But 3 years after that publication and enforcement, products placed on the market needs to have a CE brand. So we have 3 years. Some of my customers have products where we haven't got the source code, we don't know how it was built, we haven't got the build systems, and the developer who worked with that retired 5 years ago and his laptop is gone. And that product is still being sold. We have 3 years to find new hardware, build new software, replace it in all our distribution channels worldwide. That's not enough time. So while many people think 3 years, I can sit back and eat popcorn and then I'll get a checklist at the end of this. I'm looking at finding a way to raise my consultancy fee exponentially. The closer I get, the more expensive I'll be. We talked about this. So, which software? Basically everything, right? We're excluding software as a service, cloud services, but only if there's no local component. If there's any hardware or a mobile app that uses this for remote data processing, then you're affected as well. And other areas where there are strict rules and regulations like aviation, military, medical systems, they're excluded as well. The product classes, well, you have open source, which is basically, self-assessment. There's talks in the legal text about an attestation, which we're trying to help the EU define. But most of the products will be self-assessment. And you can do this according to the text, the legal text in the CRA, or according to one of the approved horizontal standards. And they estimate is that there will be about 40 of them around. Then we have a couple of different classes. The worst one is where we need an EU certificate of compliance, but there are 2 others. And it's interesting, in the first proposal there was a very, very detailed list of products. And of course, that list will be old before the law becomes a law, right? Now they define a process and they're starting the discussion about, but in general, you can see some examples here of the different classes. So in some cases, if you have a common criteria certification somewhere else from, that will probably be accepted on an important one, but not in the critical area. But most of you will end up in self-assessment. And as I said, there are 2 phases. 21 months after regulation, you're under obligation to report incidents and vulnerabilities, right? Both internally and externally. Incident is a very broad term here. You have to do that within 24 hours. You have to raise an issue. You don't have to provide all the details of the solution. Within 24 hours, you have to raise the issue after you become aware of it. So that's practically what you need an SBOM, right? 36 months after regulation, we're into CE. So many people now ask me for a checklist. What do I need to do? How can I get compliance? And I'm saying, well, they're working on that. And you'll see them 2 years from now. But then you only have 12 months. Better is understand what they mean, understand what they say, and do the right thing. So that's my message to you. Try to understand that you have to be secure by design. You have to manage and fix vulnerabilities. You have to provide security updates for free during the lifetime of the product. And you have to be transparent with your customers. Looking at this, for many of the companies I've been consulting with, this is a change of the business model. Because you brought in a development team, you created a product, you released it, you got rid of most of the development team, they moved to something else, and then you brought some people back to fix bugs and add a new blinking lamp, a new feature. Right. But now you need a development team to manage your code, to upgrade dependencies, change the API bindings, right? Constant work. And that will cost money. And you won't get a revenue stream for the security updates. So now you have to think hard how you're going to handle this. So it's a business model changer. And that's one of the reasons why CRA isn't something for the product manager and the dev team. It's something for the business owners, the C-level executives. And customers need to have insight. They need to be able to evaluate you before purchase. So a lot of your dirty laundry will have to be public. And that's also a huge change from before. And like when you buy a lawn mower or you buy a new refrigerator, and if you're one of those that read manuals, I'm sorry, I'm that old, I read manuals. Apologies, I'm going to change. But I do. But in those manuals, you have one page, which is the EU Declaration of Conformance, where they list the actual legislations they're conformant with, and there's a signature and a name in that company. And that's what we have to do as well. How this is going to work with mobile apps or other things and people not reading manuals, I don't know. I'm not going to through, but in Annex 1 of the CRA, you have a list. This list is based on the first proposal from the Commission. But as you see, it's very detailed. You have to survive DOS attacks. DOS attacks of what type? And how? But you have to be resilient, right? You have to be developed and produced to reduce the impact of an incident, and many different things. I think this is something, as an UVAST member, you have in your soul, right? This is the right things to do. There's nothing strange here. But we just need the product management, we just need the company to prioritize those. And in fact, there are many different surveys out there and reports, but about 90% of the software that's out there is based on open source or components. That's a lot. And how is the relationship between open source and the commercial vendors that actually get the revenue? Join me for dinner tonight and I'll tell you stories. In Asterisk, we created a phone system that competed. Many new carriers set it up. And they called me as a developer and told me the story about how this company earns millions of dollars and have gazillion phone calls every 24 hours. And by the way, they wanted me to create a change in Asterisk. And when I quoted them how much it was going to cost, they say it's open source. You have to do it for free. On bad days, I believe CRA will result in manufacturers sending lawyers to the open source developers. On good days, I believe there will be some sort of cooperation and revenue stream sharing, funding happening. But that's a discussion over beer tonight. But one thing that I'm trying to educate product managers is that while open source is free, each dependency you add will cost money. Because during the lifetime of the product, you have to follow that project. You have to see if they're alive. You have to follow their supported releases, stable releases, or LTS, or what they call them. You have to keep track. There will be a cost per dependency. So if your developers are adding 20 dependencies and you didn't do due diligence, then you have no control of your cost. And this is a big change. They're not used to that. But believe me, these guys, they operate by Excel spreadsheets. This is something they can put in their Excel spreadsheets, and they're going to be happy, and we are going to be happy. So move on. Another thing for the corporates, ignoring CRA will be expensive. Right? 15 million euros or 2.5% of worldwide revenues, whichever is highest. So they set the bar so high, so much like the GDPR, this will have to be a board issue, especially now during the 3 years of transition. The board and the CEO will have to make sure that their products are compliant. So short term on your to-do list, take your current product, try to figure out what the CRA compliant product is. If you don't have the knowledge, get some OWASP members over, define the gap, and try to find out if it's at all possible to make the product compliant. If it's not, kill it now. Declare end of life. Make sure it disappears out of distribution, so you're not violating anything, and start replacing it. But if you have multi-tier distribution, it will take time to empty everything and recall everything. So CRA is not about a one-time compliant thingy. Oh, I have this new product, I'll make it CRA compliant and I'm done. It's about changing the process, how we develop and maintain software during the product's lifetime. And we have to do a lot of new things. We have to be able to securely receive vulnerability reports. Coordinated vulnerability disclosure is important here, right? I read an American document about CVD. On the first page, it said, whatever you do, when you get a report about a possible problem in your software, do not send lawyers. That's the worst thing you can do. That's American style. Someone tells you have a problem, send a lawyer, threaten him. But there are better ways, but still, you need a way to handle the security reports properly. Because if you don't do it, those security reports will be published on the internet before you can act. Maintain secure code, secure dependencies, deliver free security update, keep the customer secure. That's the most important message in all of this. You have the responsibility to keep your customers secure. So, I forgot to update that slide. Yeah. The regulation has been approved, it has been in trilogue, it has been adopted, it has been published in the official journal of the European Union, and after that, 20 days, it will become a legal act on December 10th, the Nobel Prize Day, and it will be in action from December 11th. The first step is vulnerability handling. Second step, secure by design, secure by default. Cost per dependency, CPD, remember that. It's a very catchy phrase, and I invented it, so please. And when talking about this, I often meet a technical team, but the marketing and communication team is equally important, because the way you interact with your customers will change. If you have released a software update every third year, and now, if you have a controller with embedded Linux, you'll probably have to do it at least once a month. That's a big change, and your customers will look at you and say, oh, what happened? Are you not secure anymore? Can't I trust you? Marketing and communication needs to be there and handle this change, because transparency is required by law. So, SBOMs then. Well, I can speak at that for a long time. A friend of mine in England and I formed something called SBOM Europe. You can follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube and all the cool channels, because I'm going to be an influencer and earn millions of dollars from YouTube. But we're trying to gather people in Europe that are interested in this and wants to work to make it better. But the problem here we're trying to look at with SBOMs is, as a customer, I want to be able to know where vulnerable components exist in my infrastructure. And as a vendor, I want to know what I'm selling, what I'm distributing, right? So that's kind of where we are. And we really need to automate the flow here. People love Excel spreadsheets. I've seen many SBOMs in Excel, and that's not the way forward. Sorry. But we see tools coming our way. A lot of interesting things. But what I found when looking into this area is that the protocols are missing. And I'm an old protocol nerd. I've been at too many IETFs. I have too many IETF t-shirts. My wife doesn't like them anymore. Big pile. I love protocols. I'm a protocol addict. And there was something missing here. Because as a customer, an enterprise customer, I may have thousands of vendors. Imagine having to log into their customer support portal, click, download file, log into my dependency track, click, upload file, several times a week for each product. Won't work. And I'll tell you about the solution to that in a while. But SBOM is a critical tool here. And of course, you're UVASP. You're well aware of Cyclone DX. How many here know Cyclone DX? Ah, great. We actually, during this year, were able to bring Cyclone DX through ECMA standardization. So Cyclone DX is now an ECMA official standard, Cyclone DX 1.6. And this is really, really critical. And we're going to bring a few other components to ECMA for standardization as well. But one of the usages of Cyclone DX is to create an SBOM. There are other formats as well. Linux Foundation has the SPDX project that originally started with tracking open source compliance and identifiers, but can now be used to create full SBOMs as well. Cyclone DX, as a language, we like to call it, can handle hardware bill of materials, AI bill of materials, software as a service bill of materials, and many other bill of materials I forget. And we're looking into new areas like threat modeling and patterns as well. sometimes development teams come to me and say, oh, we created SBOM. We're ready. I said, okay, which one? What? Which SBOM did you create? There are many. Here's this list from CISA. I won't go through all the details, but you can find it. But it's a huge difference between the source SBOM from your build system and the stuff you run in your GitLab CI/CD toolchain with all the containers and everything, and what you actually deploy and have in runtime. And there's one missing here. The one you deliver to your customer. And of course, this is something that legal and compliance and everyone has to be involved with. You have to go to fancy meetings with good lunches or cookies. And there has to be a process, because this is a document you hand over externally. In some cases, people believe that this is the recipe to make our software. We have to protect this, so they attach a lawyer and a non-disclosure agreement to it. There was actually one guy in the OWASP SBOM forum who called in and said, well, I've taken a few hundred medical devices, I took their binary firmware, I created SBOMs, I found vulnerabilities. I contacted the vendors. Most of them didn't reply. One of them blocked my email address in their mail system. So SBOMs, they're not the recipe. If I buy food in the grocery market, I'm lactose intolerant, so I have to read those lists. That's not the recipe. That's a list of stuff, ingredients, right? The SBOM is for one particular version of your product. If you change your product, you release a new SBOM. And as a vendor, you probably have components where you have upstream vendors, and you need to figure out how to get their SBOMs. So you have to start doing due diligence. I have another talk about that. So lunch will be served at 3 o'clock. I forgot that talk. Sorry, Maxime. But that's really important. So, you have your SBOM, but you also have a history of SBOMs. Remember, you have to actually protect your customers. You provide them free upgrades, but they can deny it. So everything's that's out there, you have to support. So you have to run all of them through queries and try to find out, do I have vulnerabilities? Do I need to do some action here? Do I execute code that is insecure? As a customer, I want to know, because if Log4j happens again, it won't happen Log4j, because they are really doing all they can with SBOMs and everything. There are a lot of cool talks by Piotr from that team on that. But I want to know where in the IT network I have a problem. If it's printers on the second floor, turn them off, because my e-shop on the internet needs all the attention. But this is why they called us that weekend with Log4j, because they couldn't make priorities. I would like them to be able to do that. In an SBOM, there are minimum requirements, and this is not coming from CRA yet. We'll see what all the implementation guys are saying. But this is the CISA minimum requirements, where you need a component name, version, identifier, and how they interact with each other. So you're basically building that tree with mom, pa, grandma, grandpa, grandma, grandpa, all of it. And the name here is the critical part. And I spent too much time in meetings in the evenings discussing this. Because if you have names in the SBOM, you want the vulnerabilities to have the same identifier. This is computers, it's not guesswork, right? We need exact matches. In the vulnerability database people refer to, the MVD, there's Microsoft, Microsoft, Inc., Microsoft Space Inc., Microsoft Software, Inc. And I won't even start about Microsoft Office, Excel, and all that stuff. We have things to fix here, right? SBOM quality is also becoming an issue. We see a lot of SBOMs generated by scanners and others that generate bad stuff. But I believe we're looking at a new process where we get various inputs from upstream projects and vendors. And I believe the previous speaker said we need AI here, and that's probably something, because the assessment here, when we have a red issue, is going to take a lot of knowledge, experience about the code and about the component to assess whether or not we need to do a critical fix, or if this is something we can fix in the planned update half a year from now. So we're not done yet with all of this. We do need help. We're working in OWASP, we're working in other communities to fix this. So, where are we? CRA doesn't mandate customer access to SBOMs. I believe many large corporations will require this. It will save costs, it will give them the control they need, they will do that. The CRA mandates manufacturers to have an SBOM, at least of the top level dependencies. I believe that will change in the implementation guides, especially for important and critical products. So, the manufacturer is responsible for all parts of the solution sold. And the only way to manage that from a vulnerability standpoint is to have a full SBOM. Now is the second talk that you approved. So only 40 minutes more.
Let's go.
Okay. I said before the protocols are missing. I talked about logging in, downloading the SBOM, downloading every day the VEX file that contains the vulnerabilities and the actions the vendor took, downloading in total attestations, the EU certificate compliance. We need to automate that. And that's why we started Project Koala in OWASP as part of Cyclone DX. We are developing something called the Transparency Exchange API that will become an ECMA standard next year. We're still working on this, and I encourage you to join me in the working group because I do need help. We're looking at a tea service. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I love this. The teapot, yeah. And the storage of artifact. We're looking at standardizing the API. So as a user of OWASP dependency track, you should only be able to enter a product identifier and possibly an authentication token, and everything will work automatically from there on. We're also looking at proposing a standard API for publishing, but we acknowledge that there will be many different ways of publishing your artifacts. So we define various levels. I won't go through this in details because I got angry eyes here. But we will support both Cyclone DX, SPDX, and all other possible attestations out there. And that's kind of important for this protocol. We don't take sides in the protocol, SBOM wars, or anything else. And we want to hook into transparency systems like SCIT or other systems that's being developed right now. And I said that. So, there are areas here, I will probably talk more in my training tomorrow about that, where things aren't there yet. And as a community, we need to work on this together. And there are many organizations working on parts of the problem. So, to wrap things up, we're in a hurry, right? Regardless if you're maintaining an open source project or you're working with a vendor or you have your own company selling products, we are OWASP. We don't stand by and watch other people work with this kind of stuff, application security. We are application security people. So other guys can sit back and eat popcorn. Get moving. Join us. And that's all I had to say. I hope, Jim, you got more answers. Yeah. Thank you.